When the Steam Machine was announced around a week ago, I really pictured Framework looking at this thinking, I'm in danger. The way it was received by the community, how much hype there was, and overall there was a lot of love for Valve and this computer. And I actually thought that this might spell really bad news for the sales of the Framework desktop. But the more I read about the Steam Machine, the more I realized that while there are a lot of similarities between these two products, the Framework desktop is fundamentally a different product. So in this video, I thought I would talk about how the Steam Machine might steal a lot of potential customers from Framework, but why I still think that Framework desktop is a very unique product that will find its buyers. But before we get to that, if you enjoy my videos, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you. To start off, let me say that in this video, I will not go too deep into very technical stuff like Geekbench scores or stuff like that. I think that a much more general and fundamental debate can be held here. Now, that does not mean that I will not talk about the specs at all. I still think it's a very important debate. It is just going to be much more about the use cases and the potential customers that these devices might serve. Now, for the similarities that these products actually share, let's start with the obvious. They are both small, portable desktops. This by itself, I think, is a huge deal because if you look at other mainstream companies or maybe semi-mainstream companies, this form factor is very unique and therefore I think also very niche. The most similar devices you could probably compare these to are these tiny desktops from Dell or Lenovo. I mean these Optiplex and ThinkCenters, but it's really not the same. You know, these tend to be computers for the easiest of tasks, like web browsing or, I don't know, Excel. That is why the Steam Machine and the Framework desktop actually much more resemble something like a gaming console, something like a PS5, that would run an open source Linux distribution. And well, Linux is actually the next very big similarity. Valve and Framework might actually be the two biggest companies that actually sell their own hardware that contributed the most to Linux being seen as a really viable Windows alternative. Now, when it comes to actual Linux development itself, it is clear that Valve has done much more than Framework with their SteamOS, but this makes sense as Framework does not have the resources to really develop, their own software as they are mostly a hardware company. And normally, if we would talk about, I don't know, Microsoft, I would be like, that's it. There's nothing that Framework can do because Microsoft has also developed this really great software that you can run games on. But because this is Linux and open source in general, there is not that big of an advantage that Steam or Valve has over Framework because you can install SteamOS on any device you want. Now, it is still very important to say that you cannot accept the same level of optimization or same level of support for the Framework desktop as you can for the Steam Machine, as I've read about big problems installing SteamOS on the Framework desktop, which is probably has to do with the drivers that are not well developed on SteamOS for the newest CPUs, but still, there will come a time probably soon enough, where you will be able to install SteamOS on your Framework desktop and really reap all the benefits that Valve has developed. And wrapping this part of the video, these computers seem to be oddly similar in these two regards, which are very important for the way they are marketed. Like, point to me to another device from another mainstream company that focuses on portable or small desktops and Linux support. But now come the differences, and the one I expect to play the biggest role is the price. As of recording this video, we do not know how much the Steam Machine is going to cost, but everyone in the world expects it to be less than the $1,254 that the base configuration of the Framework desktop costs. Now I know that when you start the configurator, it starts at a little less, but I put the cheapest SSD into there and the fan and the tiles, really from the box, the least money you can spend on it for it to work with everything that Framework gives you. And to be honest, 1254 for the thing you're getting is actually really, really good. In today's money, that's like 2 gigs of DDR5 RAM, so really not bad, and you get 16 of them. But for the Steam machine, it is very hard to predict the price. I've seen a lot of speculation on the internet. Someone said that it might start at $599 and Valve will still be able to make some profit. Then I've seen some at least 750 speculation or even more. And recently there's been this statement from Valve where they said that the price will actually be closer to a desktop computer than to a console. But to be honest, this is not really helpful because desktops can range from like 300 to a couple of $1,000,000. So yeah, thank you Valve for the detailed information. But jokes aside, I really think it would be weird if Valve wouldn't be able to sell this at a significantly lower price than what Framework is able to do with their Framework desktop. But why is that? Well, the reason is the completely different approach these two companies took when choosing the hardware for these two devices. While the Framework desktop was being announced, the AMD AI CPUs that were put into this computer were very new, like couple months new. And people were very excited that these sort of CPUs are going to be put in such a form factor where they can get as much cooling as they need. This was exciting because even though you cannot change or replace too many things on this mainboard, as the RAM is soldered on and there isn't a full PCIe slot for the GPU, you did not have to go to like a shady website where this mainboard would be sold to you in a currency you've never seen before, or take apart like an existing laptop and trying to put on like a CPU or a desktop CPU cooler to really unlock its potential. Framework is really or was really the first mainstream company selling this sort of hardware. So we get it. Framework Desktop offers the latest and greatest AMD APUs there are, but does that mean that the hardware in the Steam machine is somehow bad? Well, no, it is not bad. It is just much less flashy. The question while building this was not what is the newest, coolest, flashiest hardware we can put into our machine. The question was, I think very logically, what is the cheapest hardware we can buy to achieve our goals? This means that instead of something very new, we actually got a CPU-GPU combo, which is in this case pretty unique because in all of the gaming consoles and even the Framework desktop, APUs are being used. This means that the GPU and CPU actually share one chip. And this hardware that is used in the Steam machine is basically almost 3 years old. And again, the fact that the hardware is not the newest is not a big deal. The whole package can still be extremely impressive, especially if you set it at a lower price. So we get it. The Framework desktop has newer and more expensive hardware. But why should I care when Valve told me that, my Steam machine could run Cyberpunk 2077 without any issues? Well, that's the best part. You shouldn't care. If you want to mainly play games and for this use case have the smoothest experience, while also having a computer that you can do other stuff on when you leave Steam UI, the Steam machine will just be a better computer for you. But if you're a person that's watching this video and saying, but David, the Framework desktop has unified memory. It has 32 gigs of it, even in the base configuration. I can run much bigger LLM models on it compared to the measly 8 gigabyte VRAM on the Steam machine. Well, that's the case where I think you specifically should buy the Framework desktop. And I think this is the most important message I wanted to touch on today. If you cannot even imagine that there are use cases that the Steam machine will not be able to do, then I think you should buy it. You will save money and you will get a great computer/gaming console. More of a gaming console than a computer. But if you mainly want like a productivity computer that can outperform the Steam machine in many tasks, then I would really appreciate you checking out the Framework desktop. I really think it's a really cool computer. For me, it's like I get really excited when I get onto the Framework website and I see that I can just bypass all of this configuration and just buy the main board, which has so much power saturated on this tiny thing. Oh, wait, it's out of stock.